She was only 12. Yet that night she became someone's wife. But what the villagers discovered inside that house changed everything forever. The wind carried the scent of dust and roses that morning. The small village lay silent beneath a copper sky. Children ran barefoot along the narrow dirt road, their laughter thin as paper. But one house stood still. It was painted white once, though now the walls had faded to the color of sorrow. Inside, a girl sat on the edge of a wooden bed. Her feet did not touch the floor. Her name was Miriam. She was 12 years old. Her hands trembled as she held a red scarf. It was the same red her mother had worn on her wedding day. Outside the window, goats bleated, and the sound of drums began to rise. The rhythm thumped through the walls, heavy, slow, like a heartbeat that did not belong to her. Women whispered behind the curtain, their voices soaked with fear and duty. "She is lucky," one of them said. "Lucky girls do not cry," another replied. Miriam looked at her reflection in the broken mirror. Her eyes were large, almost too large for her small, frightened face. She brushed the scarf across her cheek and felt its roughness. Then the door creaked open. Her mother entered quietly, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Miriam," she said softly. "They are waiting." Miriam's lips quivered. "Can I go to school after this, Mama?" The woman froze. Her throat moved, but no words came out. She only nodded, then turned away. The drumbeat grew louder. Miriam was led outside. The courtyard was crowded with faces, wrinkled, weathered, watching. Men in long coats, women in veils, children clinging to their mother's skirts. At the far end stood the man she was to marry. He was tall and broad, with gray in his beard and shadows in his eyes. He was 45. He looked at her the way one looks at a fragile object, unsure whether to protect or possess. The priest began to chant. The sun burned down, hot against her skin. Sweat trickled behind her ears. The smell of incense mixed with dust and old tobacco. Miriam's heart pounded in her chest, hard enough she could feel it in her throat. Her fingers tightened around the red scarf. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. Everyone was staring. Her father stood beside the groom, smiling nervously. He avoided her eyes. "Miriam," the priest said, "do you accept this man as your husband?" The words hung in the air like a noose. Her mouth went dry. The man's heavy hand reached out toward her. His skin was rough, his fingers thick. She could smell the faint scent of sweat and cologne. Her mind screamed, but her voice came out small. "Yes." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Applause, drums, laughter, and tears that no one saw. The ceremony ended, and the women rushed to wrap her in gold and silk. Someone placed a flower in her hair. Someone else whispered blessings she could not hear. The world blurred into colors and noise. When she blinked again, she was sitting in the back of a car. The old man beside her was silent. Outside, the village grew smaller, fading behind the dust. Miriam pressed her forehead to the glass. Her school, the mango tree, her friends, all shrinking away. Her fingers clutched the red scarf again, tighter this time. The road wound toward the hills. The sound of drums faded. Only the hum of the engine remained. The man cleared his throat. "You will learn," he said quietly. "Life changes after marriage." She turned to him slowly. Her eyes glistened. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I did not want it to." The man looked away. For a moment, even he seemed unsure of what had just happened. The car stopped before a tall iron gate. Beyond it stood a large house with cracked windows and peeling paint. The silence around it felt heavy, like something buried. Miriam stepped out, her small shoes sinking into the gravel. Inside, the walls smelled of old smoke and rain. Her footsteps echoed as she walked down the dark hallway. A single bulb flickered above her head. She could hear the creak of the floorboards. The door closed behind her with a dull thud. Somewhere deep inside the house, a clock ticked slowly. She reached for the scarf again, but it slipped from her hand. It fell to the floor, red against gray. She stared at it, frozen. Then she heard it. Low sound. A man's cough. And the slow shuffle of footsteps approaching from the shadows. Miriam froze. The footsteps grew louder, uneven, dragging slightly across the wooden floor. Her breath caught in her chest. The sound stopped just behind her. Then silence. She could hear only the ticking of the clock and the faint rustle of the curtain in the hallway breeze. "Miriam," the man's voice came, deep and coarse. She turned slowly. He stood there, still wearing his wedding garland, the flowers now wilted and dry. His eyes lingered on her, too long, too heavy. "This is your home now," he said. "You will learn your place." Her throat tightened. She nodded, though she did not understand what that meant. He motioned toward a small door at the end of the corridor. "That will be your room," he said. "You will wake before sunrise." She walked toward it, her small hands brushing the cold walls. Inside the room was a single bed, a cracked mirror, and a window sealed with dust. The smell of damp cloth filled the air. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her fingers fumbled with the scarf again. The red fabric now felt like a chain. Down the hallway, the man's footsteps echoed again. He moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who owned the silence. When the door shut, the sound of the lock clicking made her stomach twist. The light bulb flickered once, then steadied. Miriam stared at the mirror. Her reflection looked like a stranger, pale, trembling, small. She touched her own face, half expecting it to fade. Outside, thunder rolled over the distant hills. Rain began to tap softly against the window. Each drop sounded like a heartbeat. The room grew darker, colder. She lay down and pulled the scarf over her shoulders. Her body shook, though she was not cold. From somewhere beyond the door, she heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. And then that same low cough. She closed her eyes tightly. She tried to imagine her school, her friends' laughter, her mother's voice calling her in for supper. But the images slipped away like smoke. The rain grew heavier. The lights flickered again. The old man's shadow passed under the door. She could see it, long, heavy, unmoving for a moment. Then the doorknob turned. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. The door creaked open. He stepped inside, holding a candle. The flame danced, throwing distorted shapes on the wall. He looked at her, not with kindness but something else. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard, unable to answer. He placed the candle on the small table beside her bed. The wax dripped slowly, thick and white, onto the wood. He sat down on the chair beside her. His hand rested on the blanket near her feet. "You must not be afraid," he said. "You belong here now." Miriam stared at the candle, her chest tight, her breath shallow. The flame swayed, casting light on her small face and his weathered hands. She whispered, "I want to go home." The man's expression did not change. "This is home," he said again. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the window for an instant. In that moment, Miriam saw her reflection in the glass, small and ghost-like beside his looming figure. The thunder that followed shook the walls. The candle flame quivered, throwing shadows that looked alive. He reached forward, his fingers brushing against her hair. She flinched. He paused, his breath heavy, eyes unreadable. Then slowly he pulled back his hand. Without a word, he rose from the chair and walked toward the door. The candle flickered as he passed. Before stepping out, he looked at her once more. "Sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow everything begins." The door closed behind him. The lock clicked again. Miriam stared at the candle until it burned down to a tiny stub. The last of the flame died, leaving her in darkness. She could still smell the wax. She could still hear the rain. And under it, faint, distant, she heard someone sobbing. At first she thought it was her own voice. But then she realized it was coming from the room next door. The sobbing was faint at first. Soft, trembling, like someone trying not to be heard. Miriam sat up slowly, her eyes wide in the darkness. The sound came again. A muffled cry. Then silence. Her small fingers clutched the blanket. The rain still pressed against the window, tapping, whispering. She looked toward the wall where the sound came from. It was the room next to hers. Someone was there. She slid off the bed, her bare feet touching the cold floor. The boards creaked under her weight. The crying stopped instantly. She held her breath. "Miriam!" A soft voice came through the wall, weak, trembling. Her heart jumped. "Yes," she whispered back. "Who are you?" There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again, slower this time. "My name is Ronnie." The name sounded older. The voice belonged to a woman, not a girl. "What are you doing here?" Miriam asked quietly. "I live here," Ronnie answered. "Like you will now." The wind howled outside, pushing rain through the cracks in the window frame. Miriam felt her skin prickle. She stepped closer to the wall. "Why were you crying?" she asked. Ronnie did not reply for a long moment. Then came a whisper, almost a sigh. "You will know soon." The words sent a chill down Miriam's spine. She pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the rough plaster. On the other side, she could hear the faint sound of chains moving. Metal against metal. Her breath caught. "Ronnie," she whispered again. "Are you all right?" A hollow laugh came through the wall. Empty, broken. "No one is all right here." The light flickered again from under her door. Miriam turned quickly. The step. Slow, heavy, coming down the hallway. She ran back to bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The key turned in the lock. The door opened. A woman stood there with a lantern. Old, thin, eyes dull with exhaustion. "Wake up," she said coldly. "You will help in the kitchen." Miriam nodded silently and followed her. The hall smelled of smoke and wet stone. Every step echoed, as if the house itself was listening. Downstairs, the kitchen was dimly lit. Pots hung from rusted hooks. The air smelled of onions and old oil. The woman handed her a bowl. "Wash the rice," she said. Miriam obeyed. The water was icy. She could feel the grains slip through her small fingers. When she looked up, she saw the old man sitting at the table in the next room. He was drinking tea, reading a newspaper. His eyes lifted slowly and found hers. He did not speak. He only stared, a long, heavy stare that made her heart beat faster. The woman beside her noticed and quickly turned Miriam's face away. "Do not look," she hissed. "Just work." Miriam lowered her gaze. The old man's voice came, calm but sharp. "What is your name, little one?" She hesitated. "Miriam," she said softly. He nodded once. "Good. You must respect this house. You must never disobey me." His words felt like iron pressing against her chest. She nodded again. He stood, folded his newspaper and walked out. When he was gone, the woman beside her exhaled heavily. "You must never speak to him unless he speaks first," she whispered. "Why?" Miriam asked. The woman's eyes darted toward the doorway. Her voice dropped lower. "Because the others who did are gone." Miriam froze. "The others?" The woman looked away. "Work," she said. "Ask nothing." Miriam wanted to speak again, but her throat felt dry. When she finished washing the rice, she was told to clean the floor, fetch water, fold clothes. The hours passed slowly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The light that came through the window was pale and cold. By noon, her small hands were raw and red. In the hallway, she saw a locked door, the one beside hers. She paused, listening. Nothing. No voice now. No sound of chains. But she could still feel the memory of it in her ears. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. She lay awake on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint tick of the clock was the only sound. Then the lock turned again. The door opened. The old man stood there, candle in hand. His face was half in shadow. "Come," he said softly. "I want to speak with you." Miriam hesitated. He gestured toward the hallway. She followed. The candlelight flickered across the peeling wallpaper, revealing stains like dark handprints. He led her to a large room she had not seen before. It was filled with old photographs, dusty frames lined along the shelves. She stepped closer. In the photos were girls, all young, all dressed in the same red scarf, all standing beside the same man, him. Miriam's breath hitched. "Who are they?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "My wives," he said. "From many years." Her eyes widened. "How many?" He looked up at the wall. "Enough to fill a life," he said. "Some stayed. Some left." His gaze returned to her. "You will stay." Miriam stepped back, her small hands trembling. He watched her reaction with an unreadable expression. "Do not be afraid," he said. "You will be treated well if you obey." Then he turned and walked to the window. The rain had begun again outside, soft, steady. He spoke without looking at her. "Go to sleep now." She turned to leave, but before she stepped out she asked, "What happened to Ronnie?" The man did not answer. He only said, "Some people do not listen." She left the room quickly, her heart racing. Back in her room, she pressed her ear to the wall again. Silence. Then very faintly a knock. 3 slow knocks. Miriam whispered, "Ronnie." Was. Then a whisper came back, almost breathless. "Do not open your door if he comes again." "Why?" Miriam asked, her voice shaking. But there was no reply. Only the faint sound of breathing, then nothing. Miriam sat back, pulling the blanket tight around herself. Her eyes darted to the door every few seconds. She could still hear the old man's voice in her head. Calm, certain, final. Outside, the wind howled again, this time sharper. The house moaned under its weight. At some point, she drifted into uneasy sleep. When she woke, the air smelled of smoke. She sat up quickly. The window glowed faint orange from outside. Something was burning. She ran to the window, peering out into the yard. A small fire flickered near the shed. And beside it, she saw him. The old man stood there, holding a long stick, poking at the flames. Something dark lay on the ground beside the fire. Something shaped like cloth. Or hair. Miriam's stomach turned. She could not look away. The man turned suddenly, as if he felt her watching. Their eyes met through the glass. His expression was blank. He raised one hand slowly, and smiled. She stumbled back, her heart thudding wildly. The door rattled once, twice, then fell silent. She pressed her back against the wall, staring toward the door. Her breath came fast and shallow. A sound came again, from the other side of the wall. Ronnie's voice, weak, gasping. "He burns them," she whispered. "Every time they try to run." Miriam's knees gave way. She sank to the floor, clutching the scarf to her chest. Her mind swirled with terror. She wanted to scream, but fear held her throat shut. She crawled to the window, but it was bolted from the outside. The rain hit harder now, masking every sound. She turned to the wall again. "Ronnie, please help me," she whispered. But no reply came. Only silence. And then, the faint creak of the hallway door. The man's footsteps again. Slower this time. More deliberate. She looked around the room desperately. There was nowhere to hide. The footsteps stopped right outside her door. The key turned. The lock clicked open. The door began to swing inward. Miriam backed against the wall, clutching the scarf tighter than ever. The red cloth trembled in her hands. The candle in the hallway flickered. And in that brief flash of light, she saw what hung around his neck. Small pendant. Inside it a photo. Of Ronnie. Smiling. Alive. The door opened wider. The shadow of the man fell across her face. And in that moment she understood. The house was not a home. It was a cage. And she was next. The door stood open. Rain light flickered behind the man's shadow. Miriam's small chest rose and fell, fast, uneven. The scarf slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. He took one slow step inside. The wooden boards creaked under his weight. "Miriam," he said softly. "Why are you afraid?" His tone was calm, almost gentle. But the look in his eyes was not. She could see something dark there, something that made her want to disappear. He moved closer. The scent of wet clothes and smoke filled the room. Her eyes darted to the window, still locked, to the door, still blocked by him. He reached out, brushing her cheek with his rough fingers. "You will learn," he whispered. "You will understand me like they all did." Her heart pounded. Her breath trembled. But something inside her, something small buried deep, began to fight. She stepped back, shaking her head. "No," she said quietly. He frowned. "What?" "I said no." Her voice cracked, but it was there, real, alive. His expression changed. From surprise to anger. He grabbed her wrist, his grip tight, cruel. "You will do as I say," he shouted. She twisted, pulling away, her tiny nails scraping against his skin. He tried to hold her again, but she bit down on his arm, hard. He roared in pain, stumbling backward. In that moment she ran. Down the hall. Bare feet slapping against the cold floor. The candlelight blurred. Her heart raced so hard she could hear nothing else. "Miriam!" he shouted behind her. She reached the stairs and leaped down them two at a time. Her shoulder hit the wall. Pain shot through her side, but she kept running. The front door loomed ahead, large, rusted, bolted. She reached for the latch, pulling, shaking it with all her strength. Did not move. Behind her, his footsteps thundered down the hall. She screamed for help, a raw, desperate sound. No one answered. No one ever did. She turned and ran toward the kitchen. The back door. Her hands fumbled with the lock. Snapped open. The rain hit her face as she burst outside. The wind whipped her hair. The yard was a blur of mud and smoke and darkness. Behind her, the old man's voice roared her name again. "Miriam!" She ran toward the gate. Her small feet slipped in the mud. The iron gate was half open, rattling in the storm. He pushed it. It groaned loudly, too loudly. He was getting closer. She could hear him now, his boots splashing through the puddles. She pushed again, harder this time. The gate gave way with a scream of metal. She squeezed through. Her dress tore on the edge of the gate, but she did not stop. The rain blinded her. Her legs ached. She ran down the narrow path toward the woods. Branches whipped at her face. Mud clung to her feet. But the forest swallowed her. And for the first time, the world around her was bigger than him. She hid behind a fallen tree, gasping, trembling. The thunder rolled above. Her whole body shook. Through the rain, she could hear him shouting her name, again and again, until his voice grew faint. Then it was gone. Only the rain remained. Only the sound of her breathing. She stayed there until the night began to fade into a pale blue dawn. When the first light touched the trees, she stood up slowly. Her dress was torn. Her hands were raw. But she was alive. In the distance, she saw a road, and beyond it, smoke from another village. She walked toward it, barefoot, silent, shivering. A man passing with a cart stopped when he saw her. He asked who she was. She could not speak. She only held up the red scarf, wet, torn, stained with dirt and rain. The man's eyes softened. He helped her onto the cart. As they rode away, she looked back once, toward the hill, toward that house. It stood dark and silent, its windows black. A place of ghosts, now shrinking behind the rain. Her fingers tightened around the scarf. She whispered to herself, her voice small but steady. "For Ronnie. For all of them." The wind carried her words away, scattering them through the trees. When they reached the village, people gathered. A woman wrapped her in a blanket. Someone brought her water. The police came later. They listened to her story in silence. And when they climbed the hill to that house, they found what she already knew. Empty rooms, broken locks, and buried beneath the garden, small, unmarked graves. Days passed, then weeks. The papers wrote about her, the girl who ran from the fire. But Miriam did not read them. She stayed in a small shelter near the school. She began to learn her letters again. She drew pictures of trees, of rivers, of open sky. Sometimes she would wake at night, hearing the rain, remembering the footsteps, the chains, the voice from the wall. But each morning she would rise, open the window and breathe. The red scarf hung near her bed, faded now but still hers. A reminder of what she escaped. A promise of what she would never become. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, she stood outside the shelter, watching the orange light spill over the world. Children ran past her, laughing, free. She smiled faintly. And for the first time in her 12 years, she felt something she had never felt before. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of rain and earth. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I am still here."